All episodes of the Real Women in Business podcast reflect the opinions and views of the guest and cast McCrory and do not reflect official policy or position of employers or clients. Thank you. You're listening to the Real Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Cass McCrory, and in this podcast, we highlight women in all kinds of businesses. For yourself, someone else, full-time, part-time, overtime hustle, together we will learn from and with one another. And if we get it right, it'll lift us all. Let's get into it. Friends, today we are talking to Janice Burg-Levi. She's an executive director within KPMG, but she comes from a very rich background, from journalism to PR to consulting. And she asks some really amazing questions of herself and her team. And we're going to talk about those today, from what does success look like at the end? And most importantly, what did we learn? I can't wait for you to hear Janice's story. Let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Janice.
Oh, thanks so much, Cass. I'm really, really excited to be here today.
I'm thrilled to be talking to you again. We had a really amazing conversation kind of preparing for this. And so now I've got all of my questions and I can't wait to hear your answers on these. Okay. I'd love for you to share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, so Janice Burg-Levi, and what I do is I do marketing. I've done it in all different types of companies, shapes, and sizes over the years. Currently, right now, I run marketing for one of the big four accounting firms. And really, literally, they describe the firm as audit, tax, and advisory. And I have responsibility for the U.S. Part of our audit marketing practice.
Awesome.
That's what I do.
Tell me a little bit about who you are outside of that work environment too.
Well, outside of that work environment, I'm a wife for 36 years. I am a mom of a 29-year-old and a 24-year-old, both who have kind of launched at this point. The 29-year-old is a patent attorney in Washington, D.C., just starting out. And the 24-year-old is an occupational therapist, got his master's and is on his way working in a long-term health care facility outside of Philadelphia.
That's awesome. And you're based in New Jersey.
I'm based in New Jersey. I did a full circle back, is what I like to say. I am back in the Atlantic City, New Jersey area. I live in a little town called Margate, which is where I grew up, which is interesting unto itself, having not really lived here for many, many years. And I live a couple blocks from the beach, so I'm thrilled.
It's the best time to be close to the beach, too, as we're recording this.
It is, as we get ready for some super busy times at the shore. Yes.
So Janice, you and I first worked together when you were a marketing director within Accenture.
That's right.
That was a long time ago. But I know that your career even started before then. So I'd love to really go back to the start of that full circle journey.
Sure.
Coming out of college, what was that like?
So I graduated from the University of Maryland. And I have a degree in journalism and a minor in business. So it kind of set me off on a really good track. And right after graduating, I ended up working for an agency, a local agency in a little town called Annapolis, Maryland. And it was a fabulous start because for anyone who's ever been interested in this space, working in an agency, especially a small one, really gives you the opportunity to do lots of different things and work on lots of different types of accounts because you're still at a point where you're trying to figure things out. And at this point, I already knew that news journalism wasn't going to be my specialty, having done internships and other things when I was a college student, and really trying to take in, what I really love to do. So from that, I kept having this quest for learning. And if I look at a pattern of my career, What I would say is the best advice that I ever received was really from my dad, because I worked lot of years in the Jersey Shore types of businesses. And he used to say that, always be busy and always make sure that you're a sponge. Learn everything. You never know when you're going to need it. And so that has stuck with me for many, many years. And I actually provide that counsel to others starting out. Don't say, oh, that's not part of my job description, or I don't know how to do that, or I don't want to do that. But just say sure, because you just never know when that skill or version of that skill will come back and really put you in a strategic advantage, in a position that really can take you to the next part of your journey. So from that point, after working for the small agency, my parents really were pulling back, come back to New Jersey, and so many people were back there, and casinos had passed several years before that, the casino gambling, and a lot of people that I knew were jumping in. And they saw, big dollars to be made, and it was exciting, and it was going to really change the face of the city. So through one of my contacts during an internship, because I had worked at the local newspaper, I got a phone call from this woman who I really liked a lot. And she said, I have this, there might be this opportunity. She was running PR for one of the casinos. And she said, why don't you go interview for this job in public relations, which was also part of my background, because I have my degree in journalism also has a specialty in PR. So I go and I interview with one of the newer casinos, and they start describing what this job is going to be. Oh, and then you're going to write press releases, and somebody's going to win big at the slot machine, and you're going to get up and you're going to write that press release, and then you're going to place it. And I'm sitting there and I'm having this epiphany, because the money at this point was really good. Having been just out of school, really worked for a small agency. And so I left the interview and I thought, this isn't what I really want to do. This is not going to do it. I'm not excited. I want to get to New York City. And here I am, kind of a, flip-flop girl, as I like to call myself, right? Just starting to wear those pumps, but not really quite sure yet. And I said, I'm going to get to New York. So I end up going to New York and interviewing with a large PR firm in New York. And the gentleman was one of the top executives in the firm. And he said, this isn't going to be for you right now. Go back to Washington, D.C. You are going to be able to learn a lot in Washington, work for one of the firms there. I'll connect you with some of our divisions and some other people there. But find something to do in Washington, in this area. And then you might be ready for New York, because there you'll be able to grow much faster and much wider. So I went back to Washington, and I ended up doing some type of marketing work there. Really, there were a lot of associations and things like that. And so I did my stint in Washington, did a couple of different types of positions. And lo and behold, my life takes this turn, and I was doing some freelance work for what's called small business administration type companies. And it was through a relative, and they said, the group that I was writing for said, hey, you haven't taken $1 from us, and obviously we really appreciate all the great work you're doing. Go take a vacation on us. So I go and I take a vacation. I go on a cruise, which I had never been on before. And lo and behold, I met my husband on a singles cruise. Go figure that. And he was living in New Jersey, but Central Jersey. So I end up back in New Jersey, even though I was counseled, hang out in Washington for a while. But there was new possibilities in terms of my New York dream. And as again, once again, fate plays a role. I meet a neighbor in this little town I'm living in New Jersey, who's a top executive at AT&T. And at this time, AT&T is going through a lot of turmoil because they're being broken up. and they don't really know how to market because they've been a huge government entity, right? Spend as much as you can spend. So I end up going over there, and that story just continues to be 13, 14 years of being at AT&T. But what's amazing about that place was that at that time, they invested a tremendous amount of money in training and people, and also provided me with positions that were just amazing. So I did marketing, I did product management, I did international. So I traveled across the globe doing international interconnects. In fact, I laugh because during this time, I also had both my children over those years. And I remember being, super pregnant and flying to Australia to do a negotiation for an international interconnect. So as I said, it just provided me with a tremendous platform that really, I would say, truly launched my career as far as where I am today. And also, I would say that the other part is in the family side is that I'm very lucky because my husband and I do 50-50, and I mean 50-50. So in the early years, especially, as you're raising, younger children, there's always the next activity, PTA meeting, Cub Scouts, sport activities, whatever. And we always were able to figure out how to balance that to make it work. And so we were able to manage our hours. Now, don't get me wrong. There were a few years when they were young where we had to deal with the whole nanny thing. And that's a chapter of a book in terms of childcare and what we had to deal with in those very early days. But as they got older, it I wouldn't say got easier. It just changed the nature of being able to handle them and their interests and keep them on the straight and narrow, right? Which is really, really important. Super busy, no idle hand, etc. And so that's kind of the story. And then, and then I guess we can go through, the what happens after AT&T, because that, that's the next part of the journey. So what else would you like to know?
I'd love to know because you mentioned this quickly, and I think it's really important. You had this feeling when you've got this opportunity within the casino,
mm-hmm.
and you have a very clear knowing, not this.
Yeah.
And you listen to it, despite the fact that it maybe checked a lot of the boxes.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know, how did that feel in that moment to say, not this? Was it easy or was it hard?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was really hard because it's so difficult at that point. I think about it from a financial perspective, right? I could have come home and lived with my parents for a while if I needed to financially. So that was a plus. I could have, worked with a few people that I kind of knew because I was local. So I was always going to bump into sort of that comfort zone of, oh, wow, I went to high school with this person, or so-and-so knew so-and-so. And also, just the salary offering at the time for me was huge. Just to give you perspective, this is a long time ago, but I'll throw out a number because I think it will blow the mind of some of your listeners. I remind my kids of this. My first job in public relations paid $8,400 a year. Okay. And so when I think about what I was able to do on that, which, believe me, it was tight. But I had to put gas in my car. I had to have a place to live. I had to have, obviously have food, and a little bit of entertainment. It was pretty crazy in terms of, I obviously lived with other people. I was one step out of college, but when I think about that, that was a very, very low salary, even for those days. But because I really wanted to get into PR and I really wanted to get into marketing, I was willing to give that up. So just imagine, as the next step here is really a job with a major corporation, right? With a lot of the surroundings that go with that, major benefits. In an area that I knew. It was a huge decision for me to make a change like that, to make a decision like that, I should say, and not know what was happening. Super gutsy now when I look back, but
Yeah. Have you had that not this feeling again in your career?
I don't think I've had that. What has happened is interesting. Not this, but more. I joke with my girlfriends who have had careers and those who've been stay-at-home moms, and I call it jumping off the side of a cliff. I have jumped off the side of a cliff more times than I care to share. And even when I got to the bottom, sometimes I was a little bruised with some of the decisions that I made, but I never looked back and said I shouldn't have made that decision. But I definitely have done my share of those crazy things, crazy decisions, and things that I have done early on. So
I'd love to know, like, what's a recent cliff you've jumped?
So my most recent clip was about 7 years ago. I had a boss of mine, actually from Accenture, who called me up. I was at Accenture and said, hey, what are you doing? I'm over here at KPMG and building a team, and I need somebody. We're looking to fill the role for audit marketing. Do you have any audit background? Do you have any financial background? I said, well, I took accounting classes in school. Does that count? He said, come on over, just interview, just come talk to us. So I went over, and I literally, the only thing I knew about audit at the time was it's bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
Okay. If you get audited, you're in trouble. Okay. So, but I'm thinking marketing it. Okay. So I go in, and I was definitely way out of my comfort zone. And I interviewed with the vice chair for the firm who runs the audit practice. And he was the most fabulous individual I have ever met. I mean, the most sincere, genuine. And right away he said, I like you. You know why? Because you're different. You're different than everybody else here. And you will make me think in a way that I don't normally think. So the rest is history. Needless to say, I came over, and then lo and behold, I found out not only did they want me to do the audit marketing, there hadn't been audit marketing here for forever. And I had no budget and I had no people. So there I was in this big firm, finding myself back to my entrepreneurial days, sitting at my kitchen table, writing a marketing plan, trying to educate the folks here about what was possible in terms of doing marketing for a highly, highly regulated piece of business. And I thought that my AT&T days were regulated. They were nothing. That was junior league training. So again, the things that you learn, right? I learned at AT&T how to deal with a highly regulated environment and be successful in marketing. So I took a lot of that, those learnings from way back when, and I applied them to this job that I have now. And since then, I have a sizable budget. I have a nice sized team, and I think I've gained the respect of many of the people here that yes, indeed, you can market a regulated entity, and by the way, so does our competition. So that has been, I think, extremely rewarding for me. But anyway, that was a big cliff. Because again, leaving Accenture and coming to KPMG, again, public company, Accenture, private company, right? Partner led, never worked in that kind of environment, and doing a really trying to market a very challenging type of a business. So that was it.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that
absolutely,
there's always going to be another cliff, and just knowing that you have the basis to learn, and everything you've learned before is going to inform what your next step is.
Exactly.
And I think
Yeah.
that's such a supportive place to come from.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing that's really important that I didn't really talk about much at AT&T, which is, part of the thread that has woven through as you sort of sit back and reflect on your career, is being a woman in businesses that were not traditionally, women led. So when I joined AT&T, although I mean it was a long time ago, but it wasn't. I call it sort of the IBM era. So there were books like Malloy's Dress for Success, which is a hoot if you ever want to like go look that one up. And essentially the guidance was, you might be a woman, but be a man. So really very neutral. You wear your black suit, your blue suit, your little pumps that match, your little bow tie, which we all laughed about, but it was a certain look. You didn't wear nail polish. You didn't wear a lot of jewelry, if any, maybe a wedding band. Again, trying to make women blend into the environment was very much the thinking back then. And so as I moved up in my career, both at AT&T, then later the whole Lucent Avaya stage where I became vice president at Avaya, it was still very much a boys club. And you had to fit into the boys club. You had to figure out the club and, then go play that game to be able to, survive and thrive in those environments. So I do think that that's a really important difference. And I was thinking about this even before, the Me Too movement. I have been thinking about the early days of, look, back when, you had Betty Friedan and you had Gloria Steinem and those women, who were really speaking very loudly on behalf of women. I was always very into it. My mom was very into it. And so I was very aware of it. And I thought, well, I think that women are becoming very complacent, especially as I have employed more and more women on my team and other places I've been. Do they not understand kind of what the journey has been and that there is continually, I don't know if the word is fight, but an awareness of, not giving that up because it took a long time to get to where we had been. And I thought it was interesting because it was only a matter of a few years that suddenly, like I said, all this Me Too, the March, all these other things started to come to fruition. And it was just very interesting to me because I did see complacency and I did see women dropping out of the market, which was really sad. I mean, especially I would say my Accenture years, there were a lot of women who could not balance and they dropped out. And it was very sad to me because I think that they were, there were some opportunities to work virtually, etc. But I think that we lost those women. I mean, I hate to say it, but we lost them because many of them, I'm not sure that they re-entered the market. And if they did, I don't think that they entered back into the same necessarily level that they left at because it was very difficult. Because let's face it, technology and everything else, in terms of how we operate in business today has changed so rapidly, even within a year, right?
Yeah.
6 months, right? I mean, the pace of change. So I think that to me is the saddest part of it. Was the piece that where women were just dropping out. It was the women that were, I think, more senior that were able to hang on because they had the financial wherewithal to be able to make it work for them. In that, I remember there was an executive at Accenture who said to me, "Just outsource. No matter what it is, just outsource it. Outsource your laundry, outsource the meals, outsource." And so, yeah, that was fine if you were at that, more senior levels. But if you were not, you had to make some choices as far as daycare and other things that it might end up being a break even. So they dropped out.
It's I mean, I think it's obviously very personal decision and there's no universal right or wrong answer. But
Right.
I do feel like there is, even today, if you don't make a certain amount of money as a woman, and because of, reported difference in salary between men and women doing the same job, even today,
Yes.
you know, it diminishes not just the value of the work, but it diminishes their ability to stay in the workforce. Because yes, in order to work 40, 60 hours a week, whatever is needed in a demanding senior level job, that does necessitate that you outsource certain things. Like,
right.
You can literally not do everything.
Correct.
And I think the pay gap is such an interesting and worthy thing to be pursuing, because I think that the pay gap in specific creates the hole for women to drop out.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And it is unfortunate. And I think that I totally believe it. I mean, it is still there. But let's face it. I mean, you can open up the newspaper or, read online any day where there's another class action suit, where, a group of women have found out that they're not being paid equally. And they're doing the same job. I know it's very squishy, because being able to prove that, person A and person B, right, are doing the same job in especially in a corporate environment, which is where I spent the majority of my career, is very, very difficult. But I do think that it is one of the areas that really needs a lot more work. And so, until that happens, I think that we will still see young women in certain types of careers take accounting or take consulting. It's a very, very difficult areas to balance, especially when you're client facing, and being able to make sure that somebody's there when the phone rings and the client has an issue.
Yeah.
And that's been the tough part, virtual or not virtual. The client wants you there. So I think that's something that's definitely an area to explore for sure. Yeah.
When you think back about what had you staying in, outside of that advice of outsourcing everything, what other advice and what other things did you do that, you mentioned your husband is a 50-50 partner with you. Like, what other tactical things did you do that you were like, yeah, you know what? For example, I don't make lunch.
Right. Right. Okay. So I think my husband, my partner, whoever it is, right, is the critical path. Because I will tell you, even when I started, my husband knew, even before we had kids, I was all about career. It was shocking to my parents when I decided to get married, because they did not think that it would be that early. That they just saw me just running out the door, running away from my small town and everything. And not running away, but running to is a better way to say it. And so we were married for 7 years before we even started a family. And he knew that career was extremely important to me. And his career it was important, obviously, from a financial perspective, but he didn't have the same passion that I had about career. So to be quite honest, we invested more in my career. And so, he did what he had to do. He was successful, but my career was the career that took off. And I moved, he stayed in the same place. I moved multiple times up the ladder. And so when you talk about outsourcing, I mean, I had the morning shift, right, when we were dropping him at daycare or school or whatever, because I would go in, I don't know, 9 o'clock. And he would go in much earlier than that, several hours earlier than that, because of the nature of the type of work. He was in IT and he could do that. But then he would leave the office at 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock, my day was just taken off, right? So he was able to go pick them up at daycare or school or go over to the soccer field or whatever. So I did miss a lot of soccer practices, although I did try to make every game as much as possible. But there were times where I was also out of town. Because I was traveling, and there are a few things that I remember that I missed, but for the most part, we tried to have that balance. And so food shopping is a great example, right? I mean, now it's nice, you can have it delivered, but still there's nothing like picking out your own vegetables, right? So So my husband, to this day, he still does the food shopping, and he preps and cooks the meals. I rarely cook. In fact, one time we were balancing, and he was traveling, and I remember my kids were little. I mean, not super little, but maybe like elementary school. And they said, "Mom, what are we going to do? What are we going to eat? Dad's not here. We're going to starve." So like I cooked, and they go, "Wow, you can cook." Yeah, how about that? So yeah, so the old saying, right? I don't make dinner, I make reservations. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we were very good at having like the speed dial of all the local restaurants to bring whatever it was in, or cook or whatever. I mean, that was a big part of it. I think the other big thing was being very organized. We are both extremely organized, maybe to the extreme, but a lot of times on weekends, especially during the winter, I might, prep a bunch of things, even though I said he cooked, but there were certain things that I would make and we would freeze it, and so we would have meals, at least one or two for the week. And so all of that, making sure that everybody was all organized, the rooms were put together, the clothes were washed, right? I mean, all of those types of things, that was definitely in between all the sports activities. When they were a little bit older, when they were younger, it was a little easier. But, making sure that when you started on Monday morning, you were ready. Like by Tuesday, the world was an explosion, but at least you felt like you were starting the week fresh. So I would say there's a theme around organization, preparation, that is a big component of trying to be successful here. And that goes for the work too. I mean, Sunday nights, I would always check, my email. I would look at whatever I left on my desk on Friday that was unfinished. I would have thrown that in my bag if I was, in those days going into an office every day. I would make sure that I felt like when I walked in on Monday, like I had control at least of the good part of the day. Although things happen, I always felt like I was in control. So that kind of theme of organization, which by the way, has now parlayed into my sons, which was so bizarre because when they went away to school, to college, right, they were so used to the prep of going back to school. We would always go to, whatever the local, Staples or whatever it was, Target, you name it. And we would buy all their news. Everything was fresh, new school supplies. And it was so funny because in college, they did the same thing semester by semester, right? So they needed new this, new that. I mean, when they were younger, it was new backpacks, but everything was fresh. And they're so funny because they'll say, as they went through undergrad and then grad school, law school, that they felt like they had to start fresh, new pencils, new pens, new paper, whatever that was. And they continue this day to have that kind of philosophy of being organized and trying to some extent, especially now around work, to be as, to plan, to get their food shopping done, to do those kinds of things, so that they don't feel as overwhelmed.
Yeah. How do you start fresh now?
I still do some of the same things, fresh on a new job or fresh on a new project. I might, have, on a new project, I might have, a new section of my notebook, or, I might treat myself to, a new bag, heaven forbid, because I do like to shop. I mean, so something like a new outfit, just something that really like it resets you so that, mentally and physically you feel like you're ready to take on whatever it's going to be. What's gonna come at you that you just don't know. Yeah.
I have a big intention setting ritual that I do on Sundays where I'll set my intention for the week. I'll look at what I have coming up in that week and I'll say, where does my intention need to be focused? And then the first thing I do when I get in the office on Mondays is I restart all of my devices, because there's nothing worse than getting knee deep in Monday and then your computer is like, you need to restart. So I do all of that first thing Monday morning, and I take that time, while everything is restarting to really think back into that intention that I set on Sunday, because I find I have a very short attention span for how I want to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to bring it back over and over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. I think that being more conscious of it is something that has occurred, I think, in general for people in the last 5 or 10 years. And a lot of that has to do with, remember, I existed in a world before digital.
Not a whole long time, but
yeah, but it sounds like ancient history. But I mean, literally, when I started on the agency side, I mean, we would be stuck in the office waiting for the delivery person to give us the latest, ad design. Or then we were excited because we had fax machines. I mean, and all of this moved fairly rapidly throughout my career. But again, those were the kinds of things that, oh my God, thank God I took that stress out of my life, because that's the part of the good part of when you talk about restarting your brain and restarting everything else. The bad part is, I think, the intrusion of digital in all of our lives. And I know I've listened to some of the other podcasts, and I think everybody has a common theme around this, which is being able to better manage that. It just has taken over our lives. And I mean, even for me, I mean, that's how my kids communicate. It's crazy. My 20-something-year-olds, I mean, it's through text, for the most part. And then I get, criticized because I'm a bad texter. Because
what does that? What does a bad texter involve?
Sometimes they're just not clear on what I mean, or my texts are too short, and then I go to the next one. It should all be in one body. Oh, there's a really funny website where it's like, like crazy texts from your parents, and the kids go out there and they are pretty funny, actually, because sometimes there's no subject, there's no verb, or it's the message isn't what was intended it to be, intended to be. So yes, so if you ever want to Google around, it's a pretty funny site. Yeah.
My husband shared one with me a couple of weeks ago. It was Grandpa died, LOL, because they thought that meant lots of love.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not that bad.
Not that bad. Yeah, they're pretty extreme.
Yes.
You know what? I don't know that I realized that you were a VP within Avaya. Avaya was my first job out of college.
Really?
I was in the call center.
Really? Oh, call center. How?
I did third-party lead generation for a very short stint, because I didn't follow the rules. I felt like the call script wasn't very good, and so I rewrote it, and I got way more leads from rewriting it with the same qualifications, but that was really demotivating to the rest of the call center, and so they had to pull me out of that. And then I went and
promoted you.
And they did. They moved me into outsourcing. So I moved to consulting. But yeah, that was my first job out of college.
Yeah. Well, I ran what they call the multi-channel marketing arm. Yeah. Awesome. So we did. Yeah. So that all rolled up under me, believe it or not.
Really cool. That's really cool. Looking back in what you've accomplished, because you've done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
What have you loved doing the most, and what kind of keeps on coming up in your career?
I love well, it's not a place, it's the activity. I love writing and I love editing. And it's really interesting because because my roots were in journalism, I still enjoy that quiet time of sitting with either a blank piece of paper or something that's been drafted by me or someone else, and just being able to work on it in a way that makes it crisp, easy to understand. So I really do. I enjoy that. I also enjoy strategy. I love marketing strategy. And so what do I mean by that? People throw around the word strategy, but I think what I have observed today in a lot of the folks that are coming into the field or have been around for a few years is that they want to jump into the end. They want to jump into, let's do digital marketing. Let's do an ad. Let's do a direct market. And instead of saying, wait, to your point of what's the intention, strategy is, what is the intention? What are you trying to achieve? It's like being a physician where, I have to understand what's wrong or what you're trying to achieve before I can give you, the diagnosis and the I don't know, the medication or no medication, right? I have to understand what's the goal of it and what would success look like at the other end. Because being able, coming in at the middle, you end up with something that is, I did X of these and 5 of those and 10 of these, and you go, okay, so what? You did a lot. There was a lot of movement, a lot of motion, but to what end? So that, to me, those are the two things. And I guess they kind of couple together, but I have found over the years that that's probably the most challenging piece. And I will also tell you that in the marketers that I have come across over the years, there is a very small percentage of people who have the ability or even understand where to start in terms of the strategic intent.
Yeah.
So I would say if you're starting out and you're listening to this, really go either take a class or, figure out what does that really mean in the business that I'm in. What would a strategy look like? Because I will tell you that will bring you all the way up to, move up in your career. Mm-hmm. Because lots of people can do tactics and there's specialties in all the areas. Not a lot of people think strategically. And then be able to take that strategy and apply it and execute it. So you have to pivot, right? It's not that, oh, here you go, here's the strategy, go figure out how to execute. Then you have to also understand what it takes to execute along the way. And course correct too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I frequently will think of strategy and tactical execution as like a game board.
Yes.
You have, what your end goal is, and now there's so many different ways that you'll get there. Mm-hmm. What tactics do you want to deploy to get from point A to point B? And what do you want that journey to look like? Not just for the customer, but for you and for your employees and for your team. Because that's when you start looking at a much bigger, better version of the world when you think of it from that 360 view.
Exactly. And I will tell you the other thing, and this might be the daughter of educators in me, but whether you're successful or not, what did you learn? And I always ask my teams, no matter what. Okay. I used to have a boss at AT&T used to say, this isn't brain surgery. No one's going to die. Okay. What we do. So what did you learn from this? And how do you take that learning, good or not, and apply it to the next time, to the next thing you're going to do so that you constantly are improving? I mean, it is an endless cycle, which I'm drawing right now on my desk here, but it is an endless cycle, and people need to think about that. Not endless as in you're chasing your tail, but endless in terms of constantly raising the bar to how you could make it better. Yeah. What else what did you miss? Or what has changed in, I call it, our environment, in the world that we exist in, that you could actually improve upon it in some way. So that to me, when you talk about what do I like to do, or that I love, I mean, because I think that really uses a lot of your brain cells.
Yes. That's amazing questions. For you, what does success look like today?
Oh gosh. Success today is I'm sort of at this period of relooking at, obviously looking back on a career which has been absolutely fabulous, amazing. I have been so blessed and so lucky, and I like to tell people that in spite of the insanity of corporate America and all the various places I've been, which have been quite a few, one, I've been lucky because I have never been, quote, right sized out. And two, I have always been able to find my next thing because of my network. And so now, but I think in order to do that, you have to put the waves out into the universe and see what gets picked up. So for me, I think that I still want to do marketing, but I think what I want to do is a lot about, like what we're talking about, is I want to take the knowledge and my experience as much as possible and help the next generation, of professionals to be able to navigate it, because I think that marketing can and is such a strategic lever that, in this day and age can make, and probably many ages, if you look back, can make such a difference in business success, in the world that we live in. If you talk about it in terms of the nonprofit, I mean, I have a foundation that I established in my parents' name. It's called the Burg-Levi Education Foundation. And so I give scholarships and grants to colleges, high schools, and we're constantly looking for those kinds of opportunities to give back, to help the kids of today really achieve their dreams. So I would say what's next or whatever is most likely I'll probably end up in something around education and giving back, which throughout my career I've dabbled in and ran a foundation for a while, but now I seem to be really going much more into that. I also sit on several boards, and one of which is a nonprofit. So yeah, so that's probably where I'll end up, and probably teaching.
I think that, I found you to be an amazing teacher just in this hour. So I'm really grateful for that, Janice. Thank you. And thanks for, being a strategic thinker that does lead people forward in a conversation. I feel like there's so many times in a corporate environment where you're at a dead end. And I feel like you always create really open dialogues and streets for people to move forward.
Thank you. Thank you. I love having these conversations.
All right. I've got some lightning questions and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
What is your go-to jam when you need to up your energy?
I usually listen to, believe it or not, music, and it is Motown. I am a crazy Motown, and I also like jazz a lot.
Nice. What time do you wake up?
Oh, usually 6:30.
What does breakfast look like?
Usually, what do I have? Yogurt, fruit shake, or oatmeal if it's, colder weather.
Coffee or tea?
Oh, coffee, 100%.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning.
What is a book you've given or referenced the most?
I love Good to Great by Collins. I love that one. But I would say the second choice would be Lean In.
Yeah. Have you read Jim Collins's new little book about the flywheel?
I have not.
You need to check it out. It is awesome.
Oh, okay.
It's like a little manifesto. It's very little, but it is. Yeah. It packs a punch. It's very good.
Okay, flywheel. Got it.
Yeah. What can someone do to make you feel appreciated?
Thank you. Just say thank you. That's it. Easy.
It is so much easier than we make it.
Right. Exactly.
Janice, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Cass. This was really fun.